Hi, Senior. Sorry about the delay on this, but today's lecture, we're going to introduce the federal bureaucracy in Chapter 15. So the federal bureaucracy, this is a part of the executive branch, and basically the bureaucracy includes all of the offices and different law enforcement agencies that kind of make up the executive branch. The executive branch, the primary role is to enforce the law. And what we have now is we have many agencies, departments, offices, councils, all these different things and people whose job is to enforce the law. So our executive branch becomes the largest of our three branches of government, and it employs about 3 million people. So it includes a lot more than just the president and the vice president. Now, as far as what a bureaucracy is, it's defined as a complex administrative structure that handles everyday business. Think about it as it's kind of how the government is like an octopus. If you're looking at my illustration here, and how it kind of has its tentacles and everything. If you were to go about driving in your car today and you were to turn on like a Y94, just say for example, and you were listening to some Eminem song, right? And had you heard that song, on a CD or on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, there might be some explicit words in it. When it plays on Y94, you're going to notice that the song is entirely different, that there's words that are changed, blurted out or bleeped out, I should say. And that's because the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, does not allow explicit language to be used on public radio. So that's one example. We also have the EPA that regulates how businesses get rid of waste. We have a postal service that delivers mail, right? These are all things that are a part of the executive branch, okay? And bureaucracy is everywhere, right? It's how we organize people, kind of like hierarchy of positions, right? So the school, for example, is a bureaucracy. Sitting on top of the school, you have the school board members, right? The school board members employ a superintendent to overlook the entire school. We then have principals. Those principals then overlook teachers. And we have a separate office staff that also looks over some other employees. And that's a bureaucracy, right? It's kind of how everybody's role in a structure works. So it's the job of the superintendent to kind of relay district messages and initiatives to principals. The principals then kind of take those and relay them to the teachers. The teachers then educate the students. And that's one example of bureaucracy and how it works. As far as benefits of having a bureaucracy at the federal level, basically it comes down to speed and efficiency. By dividing up the workload, our executive branch is able to get a lot more done. And at the same time, it kind of becomes kind of a mess of, it's so big and it's so vast, like what does it all include? And it is very large, right? We employed 3 million, about 2.7 million bureaucrats, those who work for the federal government. I would understand that most of these people who hold these positions, like for the EPA or the FCC or the SEC or the FBI or whoever, those are all unelected positions. Those people do not get elected by voters. They are either appointed and confirmed by the Senate, appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, or they apply for their jobs. Very similar to how you would apply for a job anywhere. You have to have qualifications and, meet certain things or certain requirements, but you can apply for it. And that's called being employed based on your merit, based on your qualifications. Now, the question that becomes here is with the federal bureaucracy is this undemocratic? The United States, we use a form of democracy where we allow voters to vote for leaders and on certain initiatives and such. But is it undemocratic to have our largest branch of the government where we as voters, it's crazy. Okay, think about this. Our executive branch, we said it's the largest branch. We as voters elect two positions. We elect a president and a vice president. Every other position is either appointed or they apply for their job. So, wrap your mind around that for a second. Other thing to understand here is these different departments or cabinet departments or agencies or whatever, none of them are mentioned explicitly in the Constitution. All the Constitution says in Article 2 is that the president has, the power to execute the law. There's also a statement in there about having an advisor for like war and money issues. So like in this case, Department of Defense, Department of the Treasury, maybe how that can be twisted, but it does not explicitly say Department of Defense or Department of Treasury. However, what's happened over the course of time is our bureaucracy has become much larger. And it was really during, the turn of the century into the 1900s where it started to become as vast as it actually was. So understanding that, it's pretty crazy to think about. And getting into some of our bureaucracy here, we're going to talk about the executive office of the president for a little bit here. And again, this is maybe a little bit smaller. I mean, it only comprises of about 900 individuals. And again, none of them are voted on. They're all appointed for the most part or hired. And our White House. So our White House is a part of this executive office of the president. And two positions here to talk about is the chief of staff and the press secretary. So the chief of staff, that is somebody that's going to direct the operation of the executive office of the president. They kind of are like the president's second-hand man in overlooking everybody that works for the White House. We also have a press secretary. The press secretary will kind of brief the president on different things. The press secretary will often serve as the president's spokesperson too. So let's say that President Trump is out somewhere, can't take questions from the media. The press secretary would then take those questions and also kind of interact with the media and, decide maybe who is able to get in on press briefings and that sort of thing. So again, both of these are very powerful positions. Two other offices here that are parts of the EOP are the National Security Council. And this is, a very important part of our bureaucracy because the NSC, they're going to advise the president on pretty much all security matters, foreign and domestic. And usually these meetings, when they meet, are kind of like right on the spot, like it's a call-in meeting. And they're going to talk about whatever it is, some secret operation maybe, or things going on within the United States or abroad. And then our last one here that we'll talk about as part of the EOP is the OMB, or the Office of Management and Budget. This is out of all of the EOP offices, it's the largest and most influential. And their job is, it might sound very simple, it's to prepare a federal budget and submitting it to Congress for approval, because that's what has to happen in order to have a federal budget. And we have to have a budget to operate. It would only be nice if the United States actually followed it. But what does happen is this is a year-long process, and they do it a year in advance, right? So they're already planning next year's budget right now, right? And it's probably in its final phases of, getting close to the final phases of figuring out which departments, which parts of the government are going to receive money. That's everything, guys, from the national park system to NASA to the FBI, the CIA, pretty much every part of our government. And that is what the OMB does, is they research that. And they also have to take into mind is how much money is coming in taxes, right? Income taxes and such. How much money are they operating with? So, but again, some of the important offices of the executive office of the president, and a little bit more about our federal bureaucracy. Again, when you think of the federal bureaucracy, think of this octopus and kind of how the government has its tentacles in everything from education to banks to the stock market to highway laws or traffic laws. All right. And be aware of those things. Let me know if you have questions.